Hello, my name is Cara Patrick. It is April 20th, 2023. I am here with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. This interview is a part of the Tidewater Main Street Project. Who do I have the pleasure of speaking with today?
My name is Ms.Bessida Cauthorne White.
Awesome. Nice to meet you, Bessida. Will you just start off by sharing with me a little bit about when and where you were born?
I was born in the city of Richmond, Virginia, but I'm a native of Middlesex County, Virginia, and that may seem odd to say I'm a native of one place and born in another, but there was no hospital in this rural area of Middlesex County when I was born. And so although my parents lived in Middlesex, I consider myself a native of Middlesex. It's where I grew up. I was physically born in the city of Richmond.
So did your parents travel specifically for the birth, or were they living in Richmond?
No,
okay.
My parents lived in Middlesex County. We lived in Middlesex, but there was no hospital within 50 to 60 miles. And so, no, they traveled. In all probability, once my mother went into labor, then is when she traveled.
All right. And how did they travel by car? Did a neighbor take them?
Car.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. When would you say the hospital situation around here changed?
Oh, yeah, specifically there was a hospital opened in Tappahannock, which is in the next county, Essex County, just north of Middlesex, in the early 60s, about 1962 or 1963.
Okay, interesting. So will you share with me your parents' names and occupations?
Surely, yeah. My mother, Gladys Mariah Cauthorne White, and she was a longtime educator. Initially she was a classroom teacher. She was a home economics major in school. So initially she taught high school home economics, and then she eventually joined the Anna T. Jeans program. And Anna T. Jeans was a wealthy northern white philanthropist who funded Negro education in the American South, so that she provided funds for supervisors of Negro education throughout the South. And so my mother was what was known as a jeans supervisor for probably from the early 40s till when the program ended in the mid-1950s. And so then she went back to being a classroom teacher. And my mother's from Essex County, Virginia, the county just north of Middlesex. My father's name is Randolph Kyler White, and he was a businessman, a multifaceted businessman, always with one business or another. But the businesses that I remembered, he had opened a dry cleaning establishment just before I was born. And then when I was probably in 5th or 6th grade, then or 4th or 5th grade probably, he opened a funeral home in the area, and so ran both businesses throughout my childhood.
Wow, so they were very busy.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Yeah. What school did your mother teach at?
Well, my mother taught at a variety of schools. She graduated from college in 1933. She taught 1 year in northern Essex. Her second year teaching, she taught in the central part of King and Queen County, and then she was kind of all over. Eventually, she taught in Middlesex County by the mid-1930s, probably 1936 or so, at Middlesex Training School, which is what the public high school for African Americans in Middlesex at the time was called. Okay. And then her time as a supervisor was initially, they had the same supervisors for Matthews and Middlesex counties. Then they separated. She was just the supervisor for Middlesex. And then when that program ended, she was a classroom teacher in Middlesex at the grade school level. Okay,
yeah. And what was your relationship with your parents like growing up?
What do you mean?
Just like when you were in school, would you come home and talk about school every day? Like, did you all have specific family traditions or outings that were really important to you? Things like that, if any come to mind.
Well, that's a multifaceted question. Let me see if I can break it down. So we spent family time in the evenings, and on the weekends, but it was a very hectic time because my grandmother, who was a retired teacher herself, my maternal grandmother, was had dementia and lived with us, and so there was, by the time I was, in ninth or 10th grade, then there was a lot of effort devoted to my grandmother and the fact that she couldn't be left. And then my father was often busy on the weekends because people wanted funerals on Saturdays and Sundays. And so it was really hectic, but we did lots of family trips. They were driving trips. In fact, it's interesting, I always say that I had no sense of the Negro Green Book because we had no need for a hotel because we drove to visit family or, little trips, recreational trips to the Northeast, but they were, we probably didn't drive too much further than Connecticut, so we did it in a day. We did not drive south. We had no reason to, because I guess we look at the migration streams of African Americans, folks migrated from the rural south to the urban north, and so if we were visiting family, we were always going north. We weren't doing recreational kinds of things south, so it was north, and we didn't stop, so we didn't do the Green Book. But anyway, we visited, and my parents were a part of a social club of African American professionals, in fact, two of them, the Renaissance Club here in Middlesex County, and a club called the Sylvia Club in Essex. And so there were lots of field trips, we did lots of theater trips and that kind of thing. And then lots of family, lots of church. My mother was, in every sense, a griot, which not that I knew that term. In fact, I didn't realize that she was griot until she was deceased, but my mother constantly told the stories of the communities and the families, and I'm now a professional genealogist in my later life, and the fact that she told these stories over and over and over again, then, when somebody's told you something 25 times, you kind of will know it. But back to growing up, I had one sister, 6 years younger than I, so we really weren't little at the same time, but we played together. We got in trouble together. We once put the dog in a casket in the showroom at the funeral home, and the dog went to sleep. We forgot him, and he was comfortable, and my father was showing a family that had lost their loved one to select a casket, and they come upon a dog in the casket. So my father wasn't too happy about that.
I'm sure that wasn't a great day.
Yeah, that was not a great day for us, but we thought it was funny. But anyway,
Yeah. So your mother's kind of tradition of passing down stories over time, how do you feel like, you mentioned you were a professional genealogist. How do you think that informed a lot of your work there?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I didn't even know it at the time. But it's that, in fact, my mother, I guess she had the advantage of she had grown up in Essex County, and all of these counties are right here in the Middle Peninsula. Her mother was from King and Queen County. She had taught in Middlesex and taught in King William, so she knew families and people and things from all of the counties. And so she told those stories, and then I guess the fact that my father was the funeral director and his family, he was from King and Queen County, then I knew people and churches, and of course my mother and my grandmother were officers in the Women's Convention, which was something called the Southside I'm saying that wrong, okay. The Women's Baptist District Missionary Convention, which was a part of the Southside Rappahannock Baptist Association. And so, I just heard so many names and so many people and so many places. Sometimes the names are still in my head and I know that name and I'm not sure why, but it really put me in a place that when several of us started talking genealogy and family history, then I realized, wow, I know all of this that I didn't know that I knew. In fact, one person whose name is Gloria Waller and I have a family, we found, I started to say we're not related, but we had a family connection, family marital connection. We've since found that we are DNA cousins, distant cousins, but anyway, we would talk all the time, and we determined that we knew so much about families in this area. I mean, we said we know more about these families than they know about themselves. So we need to expand this conversation. So we decided at that moment, this was in August of 2004, to form a genealogy society. And sometimes you say you're going to do something, you threaten, you wait. Right then, we stopped. We called people together. We knew people who would be interested. One person who was just interviewed here, Dr. Alvin Lomax, we knew that he would be very interested. We called the people we knew would be interested. In a month's time, we had a meeting. And this group has been phenomenal beyond, we could not have imagined that it would have developed the way it has. But what prepared me for that was my mother's, and she never called herself a genealogist, I'm certain. She probably never even used the term, but she was, and she was very much the griot, but it certainly set the scene for my doing what I presently do.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so are you still heavily involved with that organization today?
Yeah, I'm the president.
Oh,
yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So now kind of transitioning back to you growing up here.
Mm-hmm.
What did you attend St. Clair Walker High School, and if so, when?
Yeah, I attended St. Clair Walker, and actually, so St. Clair Walker was high school, but in my 7th grade year, so prior to school year 1959-60, the grade up through 7th grade in the county was in the neighborhood schools. Okay, so whatever part of the county you lived in, folks came together at St. Clair Walker High School beginning in the 8th grade. But with my year was the first time that they actually brought the 6th and 7th grade to St. Clair Walker. So in school year 59-60, as I was in the 7th grade, then I was at St. Clair Walker. And this new building was constructed that was a prefabricated building, which was, that concept was new at the time. And it was really a metal building that became known as the Tin Building, also known as the Chicken Coop. But anyway, just adjacent to the main building. And so I was in that building, the school year 59-60 in the 7th grade, and then the regular building, and what would have been, was usually the process from 8th grade through 12th grade. And so from school year, 60-61, I was in the 8th grade, and through the time I graduated in 1965.
Wow. Yeah. And you said you and your sister were 6 years apart, is that correct? So were you ever at St. Clair Walker at the same time, or no? No. Okay.
No, because she would have been, I'm actually 6.5 years apart, so no, we were not there. She would have been in grade school when I graduated.
Do you feel like that changed your high school experience, like not having, excuse me, a sibling in the same school as you, or not really?
Well, it certainly made it different. I mean, I think for those people who had siblings, then they had some common things, some commonalities that, I mean, my sister was a little girl, so we were, not really little at the same time. And we, as I said, got into some trouble together, but by and large, we were doing different things at different times.
Yeah, yeah. What are your earliest memories of St. Clair Walker?
My earliest memories include, in the grade schools in the neighborhoods, then you had a teacher, a single teacher, in a single classroom, and you went into that classroom and you sat there all day except lunch. or maybe there were breaks, so I don't remember that part. But so the earliest memory of St. Clair Walker is the fact that we rotated classes and we had 5 teachers. I mean, that was really different. And so that is, say they were actually all of these classrooms, and I was just looking at pictures of my 5 teachers that year. In fact, one of them is still living and was here with us and interviewed on, I think she was interviewed on yesterday, Alice Thornton Edwards. But yeah, that was a big deal for us. And then, of course, to be there on the campus with the high school students.
Yeah. What do you remember any of your favorite classes or teachers from your time at St. Clair Walker?
Well, of course, I remember most of them. I mean, the 5 teachers are, I recall doing that year. They were Mr. Barnett in math, and I'm probably not going to forget all the areas, but Reverend Cara Patrick Morris in history, and there was Miss Thelma Ferguson, there was Miss Esther Holmes, and Mr. Barnett, and I'm spacing on his first name right now, but those were the teachers. But then in high school, I think that most memorable teachers to me, well, it's hard to say, but many of them, there was a Miss Rosa Scarborough who came to us. We had a lot of teachers from North Carolina, and I'm not sure, someone was recruiting, apparently, or there was some process for teachers to come from HBCUs in North Carolina to Middlesex County, and I don't know. That would be very interesting to wonder what that process was. It was apparently intentional. It didn't just happen. So we had a number of teachers who came to Middlesex to teach from North Carolina, and Rosa Scarborough was one of those. And I just remembered her diction was so precise, and she just made sure that you did not leave the endings off of words. So she stands out. And of course, Dr. Alvin Lomax, he was Mr. Lomax at the time, was my science teacher and one of my favorite teachers. And then, there's many of them. Mrs. Carmen Thurston, who was an English teacher, and Miss Cameron, who was an English teacher, Kathleen Cameron, she was originally from New York City. And then Miss Easter Holmes, who was a history teacher. So, then my math teacher, Oscar Prater, I think he was probably my math teacher for a couple of years. And so, those are the ones that stand out.
Yeah. Are there any subjects that you felt like you particularly enjoyed or were particularly talented at? Not really. Interestingly enough, history was not my favorite. And now I have really, in my retirement, I fashioned myself as a community historian and do a lot of but history was not one of my, I was not particularly interested in it, which is amazing. I really was not. But I guess the math and science were my best studies, although I got A's in most things, so I was just off reading. I really wasn't, quite frankly, I wasn't that interested in school. I was much more interested in what I wanted to read, and so I was off doing that. Nice. Doing your own thing.
I was fairly nerdy, I think.
Let's see. What sorts of, you've mentioned a couple of teachers that were particularly impactful. Were there any older students or community members that you considered role models in your youth?
Not so much. Well, I don't know. I certainly didn't know the term role model, first of all. But were there persons that, as I look back, I wanted to emulate? Maybe. And of course, some of them, I don't know whether Patricia Polson Satterfield is here and is one of the people. So she was kind of my big sister kind of thing. And so she and her sister, who was older, Jackie, you know, I kind of wanted to do what Pat and Jackie did. In fact, I was so delighted when it was ready, when it was time for me to take music lessons, I got to use Jackie's flute. And I learned to play an instrument with Jackie's flute. And so that was pretty neat that I got to do what they were doing. And of course, they were, you know, Pat's 5 years older than I am, and Jackie was probably even 4 years older than that. So, you know, I didn't really get to do much of what they were doing, but I thought that was pretty neat when I got to use Jackie's instrument.
Yeah. Have you continued with the flute at all, or?
No, I didn't even continue with the flute because the fingering is the same basically on a flute and on a saxophone. And so I then was playing saxophone by the time I finished high school and played saxophone for 4 years in the marching band in college. And so, no, I haven't touched the flute in who knows how many years.
Yeah. Which college was that marching band at?
I went to undergraduate at Virginia State.
Okay. Yeah. And did you do master's or PhD study or anything like that?
A JD.
Okay.
Yeah, the College of William and Mary.
Oh, okay. Right nearby.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Let's see. Do you have any memories from your classes, and as far as like lessons, celebrations, exams, things like that, that stick out to you now?
Lessons, celebrations. No, not really. Not really. It is interesting. My daughter always says that I don't remember details of things that weren't really impactful to me at the time. I really don't. And she always says it's not even your age, it's just you never remember them. And no, I never, you know. Yeah, I remember, I remember things that were interesting to me, like in high school doing sit-in demonstrations, you know, which is another story. I was involved in actually integrating our only lunch counter in the town of Urbana, and that was, you know, that I remember vividly. I remember the details, but the things that were not, that I wasn't really interested in, and I think I wasn't that interested in my classes because I don't remember. Yeah.
Would you feel comfortable talking a little bit more about those sit-in demonstrations?
Oh, sure, yeah. So there was, and still is, a single drugstore in the town of Urbana called Marshall's Drugstore. And it was there, you know, my earliest memory of Marshall's Drugstore there was a lunch counter. And only white people sat down at the lunch counter. And I guess when I was about maybe 13 or 14, then, I mean, it didn't make sense to me, so why can't I sit at the lunch counter? And, you know, we would get food to go, but I just decided I was going to go in and sit down. And I did, and I think I can't remember whether the first time I did it by myself, or I did have a partner in crime, a man named Ralph Jackson, who was a couple of years ahead of me in high school, and we would get off the school bus. And because we lived like through the town, but you could get the school bus to put you off. So we'd get off in front of the drugstore, and we'd go in and sit at the counter, and the waitresses would start to whisper, and they just whisper, and eventually, after a long time, they come and take our orders. They never ask us whether we wanted them to go. They wanted them to go for us to have them to go, and so they would put. And I was very methodical. I'd always order the same thing: a chicken salad sandwich and a limeade. And their limeades they were made from freshly squeezed limes, and so I always got that. They always, I mean, all this happened the same way. They would always wrap my sandwich in wax paper very neatly, put it in a brown paper bag, nicely fold the paper bag, the top of the bag down. They put my limeade, and it was freshly squeezed, in a paper cup at the top, and they would bring it to me. Of course, the person sitting next to me, if they were white, their sandwich was on a plate, and their drink was in one of those kind of bubble top glasses. And so what I would do is just sit there, Ralph and I would do, and very nicely undo it and sit there and eat it to more whispers from the waitresses. And, nobody bothered us. We did that for years. And then Ralph graduated. And then in the summer of 1963, I was in this high school science institute for gifted children or something at Norfolk State. And at that point, there were real demonstrations going on. I mean, I remember we were doing sit-ins in restaurant. There were chains, one called Tuttle House, one called White Tower. I mean, this was real stuff. And so I was in my world. I mean, that's what I really wanted to do. And I didn't have much opportunity to do it, or, anyone to do it with in Middlesex County. And so I came back then, I'll probably have my chicken salad sandwich twice a week at Marshall's Drugstore. But they never, they just whispered, and they took a long time, but that was it. I mean, we did that for years. It's interesting, probably about 25 years ago, there were sisters, two women, maybe 10 years or so, or close to that, older than I, Frances and Mariah Laws, and they were describing Marshall's Drugstore when they were young and what they experienced. And someone, basically the person, the representative of Marshall's Drugstore, and other people were trying to say that that wasn't true. And so I wrote this fairly caustic letter to the editor defending, and the Southside Sentinel refused to publish it because I was really sarcastic about it, but it was true. And they said that it was, ignite racial tensions, and so they wouldn't publish my letter. But anyway, that's, that was Marshall's Drugstore, and we had, it was amazing. And I was so really disappointed. So my parents, in fact, I was being interviewed for something. They said, well, what did your parents say about that? Well, they didn't stop me from doing my little, sit-ins. But they wouldn't let me go to Washington for the March on Washington. I was not a happy camper. It was August of 1963. So I had come from Norfolk, and I was raring to go, and they said, no. So anyway.
Yeah, and how did you react to that?
Well, I probably pouted for I don't remember. I remember the emotion of being really unhappy. But I didn't have too many choices.
Yeah.
So
were you able to watch it was it televised, I believe? Like the March on Washington was televised. Were you able to?
I don't remember whether I was watching it live. I certainly saw those images, and then because those images have been,
distributed. So
so I don't remember, what I saw in August. Yeah. So it was August 26, 1963, or whatever the date. I don't remember what I saw, but certainly the images are indelibly imprinted in my brain because they've been around so much.
Yeah. Awesome. How do you feel like that event and the events around those time period impacted this community, either through your personal experience or your experience, working with the history and heritage of this place?
Well, there were 13 students black students who integrated the white schools in school year 1963-64. And I did not want to be one of those students, because why do you want to go to a white school? We didn't even I won't even say we didn't like white people. We didn't know white people. I mean, they were around us, not a part of our world. So, I mean, why would, so I had no wish to be one of those students. But then within my family, I could not have been because my mother needed her job. And everyone knew that if I had gone to Middlesex High School, she would have lost her job. And it happened again and again. I mean, that was the pattern, and you knew that. And our family couldn't afford for her to lose her job. And so, my father was somewhat more insulated, but not totally, because in the funeral business, then he didn't have to worry about white people. But in the dry cleaning business, he had a lot of white customers. And so, anyway, but it was mainly the issue of my mother's job. But what I do know is that Juanita Johnson Tabb was one of the real leaders around, and she had been a bus driver for Middlesex Public Schools. And of course, she was fired when she sent her children. And she was really the moving force behind a lot of that, or certainly one of the moving forces. And she lost her job. Crosses were burnt on her lawn. And something that I learned that I was totally shocked. I mean, everyone knew that an employee of the school system would lose their job. I mean, that wasn't rocket science to figure that out. But who knew, just about maybe 5 years ago, we were doing a public program, so it must have been 2018, because it was the anniversary of Greene versus New Kent County, which is the case that really put the teeth into Brown v. Board, in that, Brown v. Board was ignored, as you know. And so when Greene versus New Kent came along, then the inevitable had to happen. And the plaintiff in Greene versus New Kent is a man named Calvin Greene, who's Middlesex native, who was actually living in New Kent County at the time. His wife was teaching there, and he was teaching in the city of Richmond. So his wife, Mary Osborne Greene, was fired from her teaching job, because he was teaching in the city of Richmond, public school, but Richmond, so he was fine. But anyway, we put together a public program held here in Middlesex, in which we showed a film that was made it was called The Green Light. Professor Brian Dowdery from VCU and Jody Allen from William and Mary made this film. So we showed the film, and then we had a panel discussion, and our goal was to pull in folk who could talk about, the film was about Greene versus New Kent, and it's on not only the Greenes in New Kent, but its impact more broadly. But we wanted to tell the Middlesex story, and so we sought to get, a student who was one of those first students to integrate. And at the time, there was only one parent of the Middlesex 13, only one parent still living, and we had her, and so on. And then Anthony Greene, who is one of the sons of Mary Greene and Calvin Greene, he was on the panel, at any rate. So the parent who was on the panel is a woman named Shrenier Burnett Hodges. And she was a young mother when she sent her children to the white school. Like under 30 years old. But anyway, what she told us was just amazing to all of us. She was working as an oyster shucker in a local seafood concern here in Middlesex County. She was fired from her job as an oyster shucker, private company now, because she sent her children to the white school. Who knew? And what she described is that for 3 years, she drove from Middlesex County to Williamsburg, I guess about 45 minutes or so, to clean motels to support her family till things calmed down and she was able to, at some point later, obtain employment in Middlesex. But who knew? It's the kind of thing that, most folks didn't know that, probably still don't. So there was an impact in Middlesex County.
Do you, trying to think of a path to take, do you think that the memories of that time have affected how the community has grown since then? Like, does an understanding of the process of integration inform a lot of like what you do in your genealogical work, and like what we're doing here today? Do you think that that has affected that in any way?
Well, see, I didn't live in Middlesex County for many years. Mm-hmm. I left in 1965 with the plan never to return. And so I lived away from Middlesex for many, many years, have moved back about 10 years ago. And so I don't really have a sense of Middlesex development. Mm-hmm. I know what I see now. And what I see now is a community that is largely unaware of anything. I mean, it's just amazing. And there's a lot going on now, but it is driven by people who have returned and those who no longer live here. Mm-hmm. And so I don't really have a sense, I mean, I'm not being critical of the community, but I don't have a sense of, you know, what the forces and the factors are that impacted upon the community over the years. I know that it's a very, very white community now. Mm-hmm. In fact, I was really surprised to learn how white it is. And of course, I guess the Middlesex of yore, because we function in our own communities, then I lived in a black world, and so didn't have a sense of what the white part of the community is doing. But it came to my attention. I chair something called the Rappahannock Industrial Academy Alumni Association, and that is a group that preserves the history of the Rappahannock Industrial Academy, which was a private school run by the Black Baptist Church that served Middlesex, Essex, and King and Queen counties. And the school was operated from 1902 to 1948. And so we've been working to, continue to work to preserve that history. In fact, we just put up a highway marker just a year or so ago. At any rate, we give a scholarship to African American students in those 3 counties. And we had such a difficult time getting students to apply. So I said, well, what is the population we're trying to reach? And that's when I learned at the time, maybe this is probably a dozen years ago, that the school population was maybe 20 to 25% African American. I was totally shocked. Mm-hmm. And now it's probably much even less. And so it's a very white place. Mm-hmm. And not a very activist kind of place. I mean, it's, not a lot. I'm working with several organizations. Our Genealogy Society is one. And most of the folk who are working on that history and genealogy don't live here. Mm-hmm. So it's, I'm not sure what makes this community tick.
Mm. Do the people that are working in the Genealogy Society that no longer live here, did they live here at one time?
Some did, but I would say that, and this is, anecdotal, I haven't, crunched any numbers, but I would say that most of the folk who are doing genealogy in the area have discovered their roots here, but never lived here. Mm-hmm. Their ancestors were part of the Great Migration, or the Great Migration, or some other migration, some other earlier migration, because what we get is the Great Migration of the 20th century, those, I guess even starting in the late 19th century, of folks going north, but then we are seeing the results of other migrations, those folks who were sold south. I mean, amazing, and something that I've learned, because like I told you, I didn't do history in school. Not that this was taught anyway, but what we've learned is large numbers of black folk born in this area enslaved were sold to the plantation south. And so what we're getting is those folk who are descendants of those folks who are finding, like they look in the 1870 census and ancestor says they were born in Virginia, or they say their parent was born in Virginia. So you get those folk who are looking. We are getting folks whose families were liberated by the British in the War of 1812, who had that family history in some instances, who knew it, and then in other instances through their research have found it, so they are cycling back to this area. So we're getting all these folk. In fact, what has happened at the Genealogy Society level is what I call the silver lining to the pandemic clouds. So of course we used to meet in person, and we stopped meeting in person. We were able to, I think we didn't meet for a month or so, but then we were able to, readjust, and we meet virtually. Our numbers have grown. We went from a membership of maybe 25 or 30 paid members, with probably around 100 people who were just on the mailing list, to 100 paid members with between 600 and 700 on the mailing list, people from all over who have roots in this area, who had a chance during the pandemic when they were home to do some things they had not discovered or hadn't done before. And then as we meet, and we literally have people from all of, when we send out our notices, we have to make sure we put it's Eastern time, and the people on the West Coast are always complaining about how early it is that they're doing this, but we literally have people from all over, including United Kingdom, who have roots in this area. So those are the people who are looking, because when you think about it, I mean, our country started in Virginia. Virginia started in Eastern Virginia. So you've just got, people all over who whose ancestors left here at different times.
Yeah, wow. Do you think that impacts your connection to place in Middlesex County at all? Like knowing those diverse perspectives, or just working with so many people who all can connect back to this one place?
Yeah, well, what we've started to think about is the history of a place, and just like this place where we are right now, what's happened on this space. And of course, most unfortunately, the indigenous people are just, we're so wiped out. So, we know virtually nothing about the indigenous people who first inhabited this space. So, which is just criminal that we don't. And we don't even know that much about the early African Americans. There's just, unfortunately, I've not seen, and I can't say it's not been done, but I've not seen anyone who's done academic work on early African Americans in Middlesex County. And the very early, but then even, we probably don't know much 18th century African Americans in Middlesex County. And so, but yeah, as we tell the stories, and one of the things that I mentioned, the highway marker that our Genealogy Society has undertaken, is to try to tell the stories of those places just through the highway marker program. And so we've been looking at, just all the things that happened. This place has memories, and as we try to tell those stories and make sure they're not forgotten.
Yeah, and what does the growth of that programming mean to you personally?
Well, what I've seen that I consider potentially a legacy of my own and of the groups is redoing the landscape. In other words, as we were working on a space where a lynching occurred, and that's not in Middlesex County, but actually we're working on one in Essex County, just north, and in King and Queen County, just west of Middlesex. But we don't want the landscape to be the same. We want those people and events to not be forgotten. And so trying to redo the landscape. I'm so pleased. We were able to get 3 highway markers. Well, we've done a lot of highway markers, but 3 a year ago, we put up 3 in Essex County within 3 miles of each other. One is for a lynching. One is for a church. In fact, it's the church. I'm the historian and chair of the trustee board for Angel Visit Baptist Church, which is the oldest black church in Essex County in continuous existence, not the first, but the oldest. And then the Rappahannock Industrial Academy, which I may have mentioned, which was the school that provided, well, I don't know if I mentioned it to you. I think I mentioned it before I came in here. But at a point, there was no public education for black folks in rural Virginia. And so the Black Baptists put this school and others in place, and so 1902 through 1948, and so that's the other highway marker. But we have redesigned the landscape in that community to tell 3 different African American stories, but to tell those stories. And then in hoping that as we tell those stories, then we start to reflect on all the stories that those spaces have to tell, because that's just a snapshot in time. You know, the lynching is a snapshot. You know, even the school is 46 years worth, but then all the other things, and of course that is off the topic what we're talking about, but the school space has particular meaning for me because it's the space upon which some of my ancestors were enslaved. In fact, the school was where the Rappahannock Industrial Academy was located was a property called Mount Vista, which was owned by my double great-grandfather, who was a slaveholder, and my great-grandfather, who was his son, whose mother was a black woman, lived in the manor house with him. And so all of that on that property. So it has particular meaning to my family. Of course, we've looked at the cemeteries on the property and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you think that legacy at all informed you returning to Middlesex County after time away?
No, it really didn't. My husband and I lived in the city of Richmond, so not far away. My mother had passed away. My father was in his 90s, and we were just back and forth a lot, seeing to him. And we kind of wanted to get out of the city, and so we moved back to Middlesex. Mm-hmm. Now, once I moved back, then is when, in fact, actually the Genealogy Society we had started before, I moved back. But it certainly has, it's kind of caught up with me, but no, it wasn't the causative factor.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. I'm going to transition back to St. Clair Walker.
Yeah, what we're supposed to be talking about.
I just keep asking you questions because everything's so interesting and I think deserves to be in this oral history. So what, let's see, where did I leave off? Oh, do you remember anything about lunchtime at St. Clair Walker? Anything about the food, the area, the people you sat with, the conversations, any of that?
No, and it's interesting that as much of a foodie as I am, I mean, food, I remember when I don't really remember the food. You know, I remember, of course, the cafeterias in a separate building. I remembered where we entered and sitting there, but no, absolutely, I don't have any real memories.
Yeah, and then do you have any experiences with May Day or special events like that, like graduation, prom, any of that you remember?
Well, just to respond to the first thing first. My senior prom, well, I guess it was the junior prom because the juniors did the prom, put on the prom for the seniors. And so we went all out. And there are these wonderful photographs around. In fact, I don't know whether, I may not have the photograph, it's probably not in this yearbook. But we ordered from some company all of this backdrop. And so, and it's interesting what this was. We ordered a backdrop of a building that looked like, really, as I look back at it, it looked like a plantation home. And so when you think about it, I mean, we had no awareness of such things at the time. It probably was not how we'd want to celebrate, because probably the equivalent now of, you know, when we talk about all of this about people having weddings and plantations and that kind of thing, and their celebrations at these spaces where such horrible things went on. And so as I think about it, that backdrop, but we thought it was wonderful. I mean, it was so elaborate, and no one had ever done anything like this that we knew of. And so it's just wonderful photographs. And so we just enjoyed, and I think my class enjoyed really being extra and special. And so we were doing some things that nobody else had ever done with that prom. And see, I don't even remember the prom that the juniors put on for us. I think it was very ordinary, but the one we did was off the chart.
Yeah. And for planning that event, did you all have to fundraise, or did the school give you money, or how did that all work?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was not cheap to order that stuff, but I don't remember whether there was a budget or whether we sold cookies.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah. What about May Day? Any memories of that?
Wrapping the maypole, I do remember. I remember there was a May Queen, and then I remember something. I wasn't a May Queen, but for some reason, there's this photograph of me, in which is interesting. The photograph kind of in this strapless yellow gown with lots of tears and a skirt with a hoop skirt. And I don't know, I guess it was a fashion show. I'm not sure what, it wasn't a prom, but it was because I was modeling on the stage. So fashion show, I don't know what it was going on, but I do remember that. But I remember wrapping the maypole. I mean, that was something that I remember each year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about graduations?
Well, the first graduation I remember is actually my 7th grade graduation, because, see, it's interesting the things I remember, but this was a big deal to us because we were at the high school for the 7th grade year. So, and of course the seniors might not have liked this so much, but we got a chance there was 7th grade graduation on the same program with high school graduation. So we got a chance to graduate and have a ceremony on the stage in the gym for the 7th grade. And so that would have been in this June of 1960. And so we were graduating 7th grade at the same time as the high school graduation. And we didn't wear cap and gown, so we wore white dresses. And I've seen a picture in recent years of some of us standing on the stage just holding our diplomas. Yeah, so that was the graduation. That's the one that stands out in my mind. Now, what do I remember about my own graduation? remember that my aunt wrote my graduation speech. I was the valedictorian. She wrote it, and I read it, and I actually have it. I have that speech. But anyway, whatever she wrote, she was a history teacher, so she probably, I don't know what it said. I have to actually have not looked back and read it, but I do have it. So I just remember reading what she wrote, but that's kind of all I remember. The 7th grade was much more interesting to me.
Yeah. That's cool that she wrote your graduation speech. That's really
Yeah. She wrote it.
Yeah. Were you close with your aunt? Did she live in the area?
She lived in King William County, which is a couple of counties away.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Cool. Do you have any memory of any big assemblies or extracurricular activities that happened at school?
Not. Well, no. Of course, one of the things that stands out in my memory at school was where I was when I heard that JFK had died. And this one guy who was a cut-up came in and told us the president had been shot. We didn't believe it because he was a cut-up. He was always, who would believe him? And I think I was in Dr. Lomax's class, the science class at the time, and so that I remember. But in terms of assemblies, I really don't, they were not memorable to me.
Yeah. How did your classmates react when that news hit Dr. Lomax's class?
Well, I guess it took us a while to even believe it because we didn't believe the guy, and then it was just shock. I don't remember tears so much from people, just as shock and disbelief.
Yeah. Are there any other regional or national news events that you remember being really impactful during your time at school? And it's okay if not.
Not really.
That one's pretty big that we just covered.
That and the March on Washington.
Yeah.
But I don't really remember anything else. The Bay of Pigs was, off on the, but not really. I probably wasn't paying a lot of attention to national affairs. And of course, the thing about the Kennedy assassination, of course this wasn't school, is my father had an attack of gout. And so he had a painful foot. And so he was home during the day in front of the television. And he actually saw live Jack Ruby shooting Lee Harvey Oswald. And so but he actually saw it live for that reason because he was home recuperating from the gout, But no, I don't really remember anything.
Yeah. Let's see. What do you remember about hearing news about integration nationally and in the state? What was your own experience with integration locally, which we've covered a little bit?
Yeah, but the one thing that I do remember that I haven't, and it's interesting, why do I remember this and I haven't? Because usually I'm the one who doesn't remember things. But what I do remember, and I need to talk about this more and see who remembers it, is, as you probably aware, Prince Edward County Schools was closed for 5 years. Well, there was a young child who came to Middlesex to go to school because of Prince Edward County Schools being closed. And I remember I think of her as a little girl, so it may be that I was like 10th or 11th grade, and she was 5th or 6th grade, but her name was Gail. And I've actually talked to people in Prince Edward County to try to figure out who that was, but she went to school in Middlesex, and my thought is that the NAACP played a part in having this child sponsored to come and live with. In fact, you know what I need to do, and this I'll be inspired. I need to put an inquiry, do a little story for the local paper, and see, because somebody in Middlesex remembers that but me, but it's not anybody I've talked to. But this child, I'd love to be able to, is she still, who was she? Is she still living? What was her experience like, coming by herself to live with a Middlesex family and to go to school in Middlesex because Prince Edward County schools were closed. But I need to, actually was talking about that a few years ago, and nobody that I talked to could remember it, and so I need to, because somebody else remembers it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I need to. And I don't know what school she went to, so she would probably have gone to, well, see, I don't know, because right off the top of my head, I'm not remembering what the 5 years were, which 5 years Prince Edward County schools were closed. So was this child, Gail, in Middlesex at a point to go to one of the neighborhood schools, or was she in Middlesex to go to, once the black schools had consolidated into Rappahannock Central Elementary School, which was across the street from St. Clair Walker High School, which was probably about 62. So did she then go to that consolidated school? And I would think so, but I'm not sure. But that's something that, she did come to Middlesex because of Prince Edward schools being closed.
Yeah, somebody else has got to remember.
Yeah,
so
somebody remembers. So
Yeah.
I need to pursue that again, because I was talking about it one time and didn't get anywhere, and I guess I then moved on to something else.
Yeah. Well, I'll look forward to knowing what you find out.
Finding that out. Yeah. We even talked to somebody down at the Moton Museum in Farmville to see if but we didn't connect on finding out about that.
Yeah. What ways do you think your experiences at St. Clair Walker High School and in Middlesex County have affected your life socially, educationally, and civically following your graduation?
Well, being an activist from day one in Middlesex County certainly set the scene for, all I've done my entire life, and I've always been an activist. In fact, for a minute, when my daughter was small, she said, "Why do we have to protest everything?" Because she didn't want to be different. Most people just go along, but that, fortunately, that lasted for about 6 months, and then she became the biggest activist of all and has continued to be. But certainly the kinds of things I was doing, I don't even remember what the issues were, and I have to ask some of my classmates, but I remember being in conflict with the high school administration around some issue. Whatever, as student activists, I don't even know what it was, but I remember being seriously in conflict. And so, being an activist at school, being activist in the community certainly set the scene for, for my being an activist. right up through, African-American civil rights issues, the women's movement, the LGBTQ plus movement. So I've just been doing all those things forever, but certainly, and I actually didn't know that I hadn't thought that anybody had noticed. And about, I guess it's 3 years ago now, I got a call from the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, used to be the Virginia Historical Society, and they were actually reconstructing an old photo of suffragists in Virginia from taken at the Virginia State Capitol in the early, maybe about 1920 or so. And of course, there were all these white women in front of an old Model T car, whatever, and they were redoing that photograph with women activists of the 21st century, and they asked me to be on that photograph, and I was just so honored, because I didn't know that anybody had paid attention to what I had been doing, but they had, I guess, maybe about 25 women from across the state, and there were, black women, white women, women of other colors, there were straight women, gay women, trans women, and it's coming together for this I guess was 2020 photograph, and it was a part of an exhibition called Today's Agents of Change that was done at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. I think the exhibition got cut short because of the pandemic, but at any rate, in fact, we were together, we were celebrating women's suffrage and all that. And the date was March 8th, 2020. And then 4 days later, the world shut down. And so anyway, that was, because that I will not forget.
Yeah.
All of that was going on at the same time.
Yeah. I just wrote that down so I can look at it later.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm going to ask a little bit about Cook's Corner. What are your memories of Cook's Corner, just in general?
Well, it's interesting. So I went past Cook's Corner twice every day for 11 years. And the reason it's 11 years, because it's interesting. So for grade school, I didn't go to my neighborhood school. I went to Mill Road School, which was actually east of where we are now. That was outside of my neighborhood, because my mother felt that those were the best teachers there. And so I was bused in a way that no other child was bused, because I was actually going, totally in a different direction all by myself with other children my age. So anyway, as a result of that, I passed, even in grade school, I passed Cook's Corner each day, twice. And then coming to high school, I did. And I say 11 years because because I could read so well when I went to school. I was in the first half of the year, I was in the first grade. And then I was put in the second grade for the second half of the year. So the second year of school, I was in the third grade. So I was in school in Middlesex 11 years. But anyway, Cook's Corner twice a day. And the only attention that I really paid to it was that there was a woman named Frances Jackson who had a store, and it was just on that intersection there. And what I liked, and I've heard people recently, as we've talked about that place, call it an ice cream parlor, and I don't really, I think that people, I liked to get cold sodas there. So somebody else preferred ice cream, and I doubt I think she just had a general store where you could buy, not groceries, but, I don't know what all. But anyway, what I remember about that store is, sodas came in actual bottles, and there was a chest kind of thing that was the cooler for those sodas, and these bottle sodas had long necks on them, so the bottle sodas actually, there was a frame that held those sodas suspended by their necks in this cooler, and so I just remember getting these wonderfully cold sodas. And the soda of the time that I liked, the soft drink, was something called True-Aid. And so that's my memory of Cook's Corner and Miss Frances Jackson, the person who was the proprietor. And of course, I knew that Lynn Davis's place was across the street, but it's not. I did never go in there. Yeah, so it was a place I passed by.
Yeah. Do you remember, what some of your classmates might have been having experiences in Cook's Corner at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'll just finish by asking if there's anything else you wish to share for the record.
Not that I can think of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking, I actually looked at my yearbook, and I should look at this. I can tell you about some of the things I did at St. Clair Walker, which I didn't even necessarily remember, but I was the editor of this yearbook.
Oh, nice.
And I borrowed this copy of it, and so I did that. And apparently I did a lot of stuff. I had to look back at this, but I was the student council president. I do remember that part, though. And that's probably when I was engaged in whatever the issues we had with the administration. Like I said, I don't even remember what they were. Some of my classmates probably do. And so I was, one of the things I do remember from high school is High School Bowl. You know, there was a show that came on television, I don't remember what network, called College Bowl. And basically it was a quiz show, and so there were teams from different colleges and universities who were questioned, you know, certain questions. I mean, and I don't even remember much about I don't remember anything about the questions. I may have been a little bit like Jeopardy, or it may have been more academic. I'm just not sure. But I think it was probably a little bit more academic than that, and not so much current affairs, current events and that kind of thing. But anyway, so there were these teams. So there was a high school bowl competition in the area that was modeled on College Bowl, the show on television. And so I was a part of that. In fact, I was captain of the high school bowl team, and so I remember going around from school to school, and the one thing that stands out in my mind, because I guess, and I don't know exactly how the schools were divided, but there were, you know, rural schools didn't compete against city schools in most things, and there were divisions, and I don't know how they divided that up, but so our local rural schools, I mean, in these counties are very, you know, similar. But then James Weldon Johnson High School, which was in York County, was a little bit more suburban, a little bit, you know, larger population, a little bit more going on. And so I remember our competing against James Weldon Johnson High School, and we won. And that was a big deal, because that was a big school, relatively speaking, in Madera size. You know, we probably had under 40 people in my high school graduating class. And so, you know, this was more like well, not a city school, but yeah, that was a big deal to us. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Sounds like you've always liked to be busy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Is there anything else?
I can't think of anything else.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Well, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing.
All right, thank you.